De aquella viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
La bestialidad imperialista. Bestialidad que no tiene una frontera determinada ni pertenece a un país determinado. Bestias fueron las hordas hitleristas, como bestias son los norteamericanos hoy, como bestias son los paracaidistas belgas, como bestias fueron los imperialistas franceses en Argelia. Porque es la naturaleza del imperialismo la que bestializa a los hombres, la que la convierte en fieras sedientas de sangre que están dispuestas a degollar, a asesinar, a destruir hasta la última imagen de un revolucionario, de un partidario de un régimen que haya caído bajo su bota o que luche por su libertad. Y la estatua que recuerda a Lumumba, hoy destruida pero mañana reconstruida, nos recuerda también en la historia trágica de ese mártir de la revolución del mundo, que no se puede confiar en el imperialismo, pero ni tantito así, nada.
En las condiciones de la inmensa mayoría de los países de América Latina, no hay otro camino que la lucha armada. Y esa parece ser la situación también en muchos otros países de Asia y de África. Por lo general siempre el imperialismo cuenta con todos los medios, aliado con las oligarquías de cada uno de los países, para impedir el triunfo democrático de la revolución. Y tiene atado a los pueblos por una especie de nudo gordiano que solo se puede quebrar mediante la lucha armada. Además, el camino de la lucha armada no es el camino que hayan escogido los revolucionarios, sino es el camino que los opresores le han impuesto a los pueblos. Y los pueblos entonces tienen dos alternativas: o doblegarse o luchar. Y luchar de la única forma en que pueden llegar a vencer al enemigo, que tienen más recursos económicos, infinitamente más, que tienen mucho más recursos técnicos. La guerrilla significa el empleo de los recursos del terreno y sobre todo el empleo de los recursos sociales de un pueblo para superar las ventajas que el enemigo posee en recursos técnicos y en recursos de tipo económico. El guerrillero, mediante una táctica hábil, muy flexible, mediante la explotación al máximo de todas las ventajas del terreno, mediante la movilización de los recursos sociales, es decir, de los sectores que son mayoritarios de la población, que son los sectores explotados, los sectores obreros y campesinos, y inspirado en una causa justa, inspirado en un factor moral muy poderoso, que los hace capaces de soportar privaciones, de adaptarse a las condiciones de vida más difíciles. Toma ese camino, que es el único camino para lograr conseguir un objetivo revolucionario. Eso fue lo que nosotros hicimos. Para poder hacer todo lo que hoy estamos haciendo en nuestro país, para poder llenar estas montañas de carreteras, para poder crear las condiciones de vida decorosas para el pueblo, para erradicar la ignorancia, para desarrollar en todos los órdenes a nuestro pueblo, fue necesario. Lo hicimos y ahora estamos haciendo esto.
Comandante Fidel Castro Ruz, explaining what true revolutionary politics and theory and action looks like and sounds like, mobilizing the masses, not taking money from the enemy, not taking money from the empire, from the NGOs, from academia. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 95, Unmasking Imperialism, exposing imperialist propaganda in mainstream media. Today, we are talking about hashtag activism and liberal academia. We are shitting on all of the fucking whack ass liberals today. We are calling them out. We are pointing out their support for empire, even though they tout themselves as revolutionaries, even though they think they're the most woke, progressive people. They're supporting the color revolution in Iran. They're supporting Pray for Ukraine. They fall for the spells. They fall for all the lies. And we're going to be talking about all of that today. We're going to expose the ways in which hashtag activism and liberal academia serve imperialism. We're going to discuss the weaponization of empathy on social media with the use of hashtags that promote regime change. More specifically, the Mahsa Amini, hashtag Mahsa Amini PSYOP, a psychological operation, and the attempted color revolution in Iran. We're going to discuss how universities in the West serve as brainwashing camps for capitalism, pumping out academics who get paid to regurgitate imperialist propaganda with a liberal face. And we're going to talk about why the Western left continues to blindly follow and support the political cues of both corrupt political institutions. Joining me today, two longtime comrades, people who I respect a lot, who have always consistently never fallen for the spells, never fallen for the lies. Two comrades who always explain things very well and speak to the people. First off is Comrade Erica Caines, who is a poet, writer, organizer in Baltimore and the DMV area. She's an organizing committee member with the Anti-War Coalition, Black Alliance for Peace, as well as an outreach member for the Black-centered Ujima People's Progress Party. Erica also founded Liberation Through Reading in 2017 as a way to provide Black children with books that represent them. Please make sure to read Erica's recent article on Hood Communist. Shout out to Hood Communist, called hashtag Activism and U.S. Imperialism. One of the best articles out there, breaking down the lies about Iran. And mad props to Erica for writing that article, because that's not a trendy position to take. That's not the popular position to take. But she put it anyway because it's the right thing to do. It's the principled thing to do. How's it going, Comrade Erica?
It's going. It's going. Peace to you, and thank you for having me again.
Of course. No, thank you so much for joining. I also love your shirt, From the River to the Sea, Palestine Will Be Free. An amazing shirt. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And that's exactly, it's connected as well, because Iran is one of the few countries in the Middle East that has stood with Palestine since day one in 1979. Even though Iran is not even ethnically Arab, Iran is actually Persian, right? And there unfortunately has been some historic animosity between Arabs and Persians. Despite that, even though Iran is of a different Islamic sect, or a Shia Islam, compared to the predominantly Sunni Palestine, Iran from day one has always been for Palestinian liberation, the one-state Palestinian solution. Whereas you see these Arab Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar siding with the Zionist settler colonial state of Israel. So shout out to Iran, shout out to Palestine. Also joining us is my homie, my comrade, Chris Durán, who's a student and community organizer with Free Them All, New Jersey, and has worked with other campaigns to free U.S.-held political prisoners and prisoners of war. Chris is also a second-year graduate student at NYU studying Latin American and Caribbean studies, and he's our insight into the liberal academia and how they propagate and put out talking points that support empire. I went to NYU as well. We could talk a little bit about that later on. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing all right. Pretty exhausted, but I'm here, and yeah.
For sure. No, thanks for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure having you on, and we always kind of commiserate about how annoying NYU is, because we both went to NYU. You're at NYU now. I went to NYU before, and it's funny because when I was first getting into leftism, everybody would tell me like, "Oh, go to NYU. Like that's a leftist school. That's where there's like Marxists there." And I'm like, "All right, let's check it out." I go there. I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, and the so-called communists and Marxists were putting out talking points about a regime change in Syria. Like the first event that I saw at NYU was like, in support of the Free Syrian Army and the Color Revolution in Syria. So that was like really insane to see. And by the way, shout out to everybody who's watching and listening. Shout out to Comrade Big Teal, one of my favorites out there, Cobra Commander, Big Teal in the house, TI, to James, to everybody who's watching and listening. Thank you guys. And that's the thing, like my channel, like I was talking about this before with somebody else. I don't do this for money or for hustles or for anything. For me, this is therapeutic. This is my little contribution to the movement. And we have a small little tight-knit community, but I'd rather have a solid small crew, a cadre of principled ass communists and comrades than have like fucking 3,000 liberal whack ass followers, So I really appreciate you guys watching and listening, and I'm hoping for this to be a really good discussion. What I want to do is I want to kick off the discussion talking about, you guys all are aware of the protests in Iran. I've covered it here as well. A few episodes back, I also spoke to Sister Marzieh Hashemi, who actually is from the U.S. She's from New Orleans, Louisiana. She moved out to Iran after the revolution in the 70s and has lived there ever since. And she was actually detained, kidnapped by the FBI, has been undergoing some horrible stuff by the U.S. state. And in Iran, she is doing amazing journalistic work. And she explained on the ground, like, what is actually happening and how, like, there's certain sectors of Iranian society that are protesting, just like there's certain sectors of Venezuelan, Cuban, Nicaraguan people who protest their governments, and oftentimes they're backed by the West. And so I want to play a clip. This is a clip from our favorite informative news station, MSNBC. Women explain why they cut their hair amid growing protests in Iran. I want to share this clip and talk a little bit about the whole hashtag activism, and then we're actually going to read some excerpts from Erica's article. But I just want to play this to set the tone first.
I was so angry. I was really sad. I was crying. The world has to know what is going on right now. This is not just a simple thing that we can just get away with and live our life.
Nobody's going to advocate for us like we are. I feel like a moral responsibility, especially like when it comes to my people, to keep advocating for them, like posting every single day, trying to share as much as I can. Even though I don't have a big...
The internet is down and they are killing the people. Complete bullshit.
It's potential for the domino effect of okay, I'm going to share something, okay, maybe somebody else will, and it'll just go down the line.
Thousands are taking to the streets in anti-government protests following the death of a 22-year-old woman who was in police custody, arrested by Tehran's morality police for not wearing her headscarf correctly.
Iranian officials saying she suffered a heart attack from a previous health condition. But Amini's father calling that a lie, saying she had no prior health issues and was killed at the hands of police.
The Iranian government is cracking down, arresting activists and students following 8 days of the largest anti-government demonstrations the country has seen in years.
So I heard that women are cutting their hair. This is one of the things that I can do.
Look at her apartment. She looks so bougie. She looks like she's in the West Village or some shit.
I'm a public figure, and there are so many people who follows me. It might be one of the reasons that the world can hear us.
I could tell she's annoying.
could just see like the pain in their eyes and like the frustration. It's an everyday thing. It's like having to worry about like ever going out the door, like who's gonna harass you. I just ended up seeing that video and I was like, all right, like it's just time. This is just me cutting my hair, like in solidarity, like just trying to spread awareness.
I live for these people.
Trying to spread awareness, guys. Those keyword. Once you hear that, run.
Like I might not be in the country present, but I hear them and I want to like be their voice. Mahsa Amini, who was killed by a morality police, she was Kurdish. Whenever they want to like say something is true, they say, I swear to my mom's hair. So it's a huge thing for them. And also because she was killed because of her hijab and because her hair was out, they put it together and that's how this came out, I think.
As horrible as it sounds, it's like stuff like this happens all the time and it's never really taken seriously by the Western media. Like the whole point of this is to like spread awareness. They have no access to the resources in order to be able to like share this information.
And this is not
It's all over the world. What is she talking about? This is like this has been like the main story for like a fucking month.
a situation that we should waste time. They do not have any access to the internet. They do not have any access to WhatsApp. They do not have any access to Instagram. I have so many friends that they have family in there. They do not know where they are.
The reason that everybody keeps saying like be our voice, because that's like the most consistent thing that I see like Iranians like commenting. They can maybe potentially only have enough like internet in order to post like a comment, and so they're really counting on it.
That's bullshit. Iran actually has the fastest high-speed internet in the Middle East. Iran is one of the most developed, industrialized countries of the Middle East. I don't know what the fuck. I know plenty of Iranians. I talk to them all the time on WhatsApp. There's no issues with internet.
To like do what we can.
They need help. They're getting killed. They're getting arrested.
I think I just always related like back to home. Like I just think about all the people in my family, like all the women that have to deal with this. I'll feel guilty like doing normal thing, taking a break. Because like they can't take a break. They're in it all the time.
People in Iran are protesting, and it's not because of they don't want to have hijab. It's really more than that.
This isn't like just like a feminism issue. This isn't just like an LGBTQ plus issue. This is also just a financial issue, like economic stress.
Oh my God.
It's because of everything that has been going on over the past 43 years since the revolution. They only want their basic human rights. That's one of
human
the main
rights,
things
another
that they
buzzword.
want. Basic human rights.
So fucking annoying liberals, as always. Chris probably has class with them. He's probably seen them at the library, especially the blue-haired one. Just crazy. And people are just always, they eat this shit up. They're like, oh my God, look, you see feminists from Iran, we have to go in. And here's the thing, guys, like they never say like, oh, we want U.S. imperialist regime change. They're like, we have to do something. They need human rights. So, Erica, your thoughts on all this. I'll let you, take over the mic and just give us your overall thoughts on this and what compelled you to write the article that you wrote as well.
Yeah, well, a lot of that is what compelled me to write the article. I know you were saying like listen to these words, like particular keywords like human rights, raising awareness, we have to be the voice and things like that. But yeah, like you said, it's funny that they're saying that there's because it is a widespread story. The other day I commented that it's really interesting that there are currently uprisings in Chad, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Haiti, and that is not widely shown. And the Iranian protests that is happening, and not the anti-imperialist ones or the the anti-U.S. protests, which are massive in the capital city. The ones that you are seeing nonstop is the protests about or that claims to be on behalf of that young woman. But the other thing that struck me was when they said, well, this is not just a feminist issue and this is not an LGBTQ issue. And I was like, well, when was it an LG? Was she like part of that community? So it's so like how they interlope or interweave all of these sort of identities to try to, again, weaponize empathy. I think, to Onye's credit, that's like one of her best pieces. She's a fantastic writer, but for me, that's like one of the top two.
Yep.
Because it was just, you could see it in real time. I always like go back to that because you can see it play out and how that manifests, and people like seeing it explode. And even the woman or the singer that you commented was obviously rich. The apartment obviously was nice. So like even she commented, she was like, well, I think that's what this is about. Like she's not even really sure. She doesn't really have the details, but she's down. The hair has been cut. She's with it. So for me, it's just like, wow, to see that how widespread, and seeing it happen in the earlier, when it first happened, for me, it was like, so at what point, especially on the left, right? Because you kind of expected certain things. But people who claim to be on the left, at what point do we assess the situation? Like we literally just went through this with Cuba. Like this, in a similar sort of way. And it sprung out through a hashtag. It sprung out through all these random accounts that never existed before. And then a little investigation, you see where these accounts are tied to the U.S., obviously, to that lady who's, she's an agent. She's being held here. So it's all these things that just, if people were to just investigate initially, you would see a lot of things don't quite add up. A lot of things don't quite make sense. And then for me, it's just this sort of Western chauvinism, especially this U.S. chauvinism, where the savior complex that people have here, that just draws them on feeling like, well, okay, at least I did something, or I have to do something for these, But funny enough, I was listening to this podcast, and I can't even remember, but my comrade Josh, it was his, I think it was Returning to the Source, and they had Tamani Shajan on there, and towards the end, they take questions, and it was someone who was Iranian, and they had commented, well, we had, we stand up for Black lives, and this was like months ago, honestly, and they were saying, there's nobody calling out for Iranians, and at that time, there was already little things happening where you could see, they're trying to take this in a direction at some point. So to hear that comment and then to see this jump off, it was like, wait a minute, let's think this through. And then there was so the sanctions that were happening over the summer, especially with them alleging, because my mom watches MSNBC, I think I say that all the time, but that's how I know exactly what's being said and what's not being said. But they're alleging that Iran is giving weapons to Russia and all of that. And they've been saying that. They were sanctioning. And then I think just today they sanctioned government officials. And if people really understood the deep history, I think Iran is the longest, they're the country with the longest held sanctions. They've been sanctioned the longest, I think, since revolution, so over 40 years, or about 40 years, than any other country. They've held U.S. sanctions. My first introduction to Iran was Shah's of Sunset. Admittedly, I'm a Bravo fan, but that was my, you know how wild that is. And I think the episode where I really was like, wait the fuck, is when they went to Israel, and it was just weird. The whole episode was weird. And now to see Reza, I think people show that clip of Reza all the time now. Reza's like, just blow up Iran, but not the good people, just the bad ones. It's like, and that's how extreme, because they have these really impassioned feelings. They're like Gusanos almost, in that sort of unreasonable hatred for their home country. And it took me, seeing that, having seen that, it's like, okay, so I know there is this sect of Iranians that do exist. They do exist as a diaspora. They do want regime change. They do want pre-revolution time, and they would, capitalize on these events. So I think when I wrote #activism, it was just really like drawing around the way that this shit takes off like wildfire. And I use, 4 examples of that. But yeah, it just takes off like wildfire, and nobody really questions or stops or assesses a damn thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point. And I actually live, I'm talking to y'all from LA. I live in LA. I mean, I live in the East Side, which is predominantly Latino. But on the west side, there's a lot of Iranians. There's a lot of right wing, the Shahs of Sunset and all that, and they are right wing as fuck, Zionist as fuck. They want to return to a monarchy. That's what's interesting. Like, I tell people this all the time. Like, if you look at a lot of the flags of, I just want to pull one up real quick. If you look at a lot of the flags that they have at these protests for Mahsa Amini and all that, so let me just quickly show you guys. The flags that they wave are the flags of the monarchy of the Shah Reza Pahlavi dynasty that they had back in the day. So this is one right here. It's kind of in the corner. I'll try to find a better one, but that flag all the way in the top right, that's not the Iranian flag of today. That is the Iranian flag when it was a dynasty with the lion carrying the sword. And that flag represents the dynasty of the Pahlavi family, right wing, a monarchy that was really, really fucking racist, by the way. Like, they hated non-Persians. They looked down on other ethnicities. They had a feudal monarchical system. So you have these so-called progressives and so-called leftists who are supporting these protests, and they're literally waving flags. It'd be like rocking a fucking Confederate flag. I mean, I don't fuck with the U.S. flag anyway, regardless. But it'd be like going to a protest and be like, "Hey guys, look, they're rocking the Confederate flag. They want to go back to to those times, right?" Or it's like, are people waving the flag of like French Indochina, right? It's like that. It's just insane to me that people don't understand it. But I think a lot of it is just miseducation. I think it's easy and trendy. People find these things and they just want to jump on the bandwagon. And so what I do, I want to read some of your article, Erica. But Chris, why don't you share your thoughts on this? Like, what have you seen? Have you seen anything at NYU related to not even just Iran, but like the whole Ukraine-Russia thing? Like, what has been tell us some anecdotes about your recent experience, like at NYU, and just people and academics supporting imperialism.
I mean, yeah, I think, well, for one, there's always like the obvious right-wing, element there, but I think one of the strongest elements is the fact that, in every case, and I've seen this come up multiple times, when countries like Bolivia or Nicaragua or Venezuela or Cuba are all discussed, and of course Ukraine and Russia, but it's it's the so-called leftists, the latte leftists at NYU that are the ones who are the most, some of the most fervently, in favor of this sort of what they see as like, a legitimate insurrectionary movement that can be moved to the left. And like I had a question asked the other day by one professor, because like I criticized the San Isidro movement in Cuba, which is demonstrated like there's State Department documents that show that they're funded by the United States, and using the sanctions, using the frustration with that to like mobilize people and then lead them in a right-wing direction. But then the response to that was like, oh, so what is a legitimate insurrectionary movement in Cuba? I'm like, well, maybe one that is in line with the revolutionary process. Maybe one like what there's sort of weird obsession among leftists, particularly in this sort of NGO or academic world, where they have like this sort of lust for a revolution to happen so that they can write about, because of their own inability to organize any type of, or use the sources that they have to organize any type of movement where they are. They treat it like it's a fucking aesthetic. They get to go to these little cultural programs in the city and shit, and that's their satiates their like idea of like, oh, they're cultural, they're they're in support of all these different nationalities, but at the end of the day, they go along with international imperialist forces. And I think that I was watching a thing, there's like a talk by like Vijay Prashad earlier, and he was like talking about this one comment that he made to another Marxist named like David Harvey, who's like this white Marxist. And I mean, there's some work that's respectable for him, but he like made some kind of comment like imperialism doesn't really matter anymore. and he was sort of making like that countries like Brazil can be imperialist or things like that. And
oh my god.
And then VJ like straight up told him, like, you live on the other side of imperialism, so you're making these really reckless comments that don't actually matter in real life. That you're making these sort of abstract analyses that you're not, to make up for the fact that your Marxism or your approach to socialism isn't actually like functional in the spaces that you operate in. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that there's sort of like just a separation from reality, and again, we can get into it later, but like the funneling of maybe radically minded students into like that sort of NGO industrial complex, and that sort of just moving them away from anything that they could productively be doing, like addressing the sanctions on Cuba, addressing the sanctions on Iran, which is the source of the economic woes, along with the the colonialism before that. So
yeah, no, it's insane. I can't believe fucking David Harvey said that. He's a piece of shit. Fuck David Harvey. He's to say that imperialism doesn't matter anymore, and that's one of the dangerous things too. I think the most dangerous people for imperialism are people who brand themselves as leftist and will talk about Russian imperialism and Iranian imperialism, and we'll talk about hegemony from the East and all this horrible stuff. And it's just really disgusting to see that. And there's so many people in academia who make a living out of it. And I think it just shows you have to give it to the U.S. imperialists. They have a lot of brilliance when it comes to strategy. They know that the best way to suppress the enemy, like you have this, especially in the 60s and 70s, you have like anti-imperialist movements coming up, right? Like the Panthers, the Young Lords, the Brown Berets, like all these different even some of the white liberal movements are calling out the Vietnam War. So what happened is that it's interesting because I started talking, I was talking to Ophelia the other day about what happened to the radical movements in LA, because out here in California, there was a lot of Brown Beret movements, Chicano nationalist movements that were rising up and protesting imperialism and all that. And what happened is that a lot of the groups that were formed, like the Brown Berets on these radical movements that were communists and pro, black and brown nationalism, a lot of those people were just hired by NGOs, and they started groups like the Mexican American Opportunities Foundation. And this other group, LULAC or something. It's like the Latinos Unidos for Advance. Like they basically, instead of coming at that genuine movement full force and trying to stop it, they're like, come, I'll hire you. Like work for me. It's like those movies where you see the feds chasing after like a casino crook or a robber or somebody who's really good at bank robbing or stealing money from casinos, and then it gets to that scene where at the end they're like, oh, we're not going to arrest you, we're going to hire you, you're going to work for us. I feel like in many ways it's kind of like their approach, right? Like they're like, we want to learn from you, teach us your language of revolution, and they appropriate those words and they use it for their campaign. So it's just insane the way they do things. Pretty crazy stuff. I want to read some of the article from Erica again. Shout out to Hood Communists. Please check out this article, #Activism and U.S. Imperialism by Erica. So I'm just going to read some of it. The abundance of #activism has created a false sense of importance for the everyday individual, being driven by weaponized empathy to speak out about a cause or injustice happening internationally. This false sense of importance, brought on by the use of hashtags as awareness, is ignited by already held biases about the colonized world, which inevitably leads to both overt and covert calls for Western intervention to, quote, save whoever has been deemed needing of saving. The use of #activism has certainly all but replaced in-person community organizing. It has allowed an array of people across the country and across the world to be united in solidarity for a cause that can be summarized in as small a character limit as possible. This connection, of course, is sometimes is oftentimes heralded as one of the more positive things about social media. However, in the last 10 years, just about every coup d'etat, attempted coup, and the expansion of U.S. military commands like AFRICOM can be traced back to a hashtag. It may be as simple as hashtag Libya during the height of the NATO-orchestrated invasion efforts, or as emotionally baiting as, quote, SOS Nicaragua, with intentions to oust the popular Sandinista government. Unfortunately, these past examples do not move the overwhelming majority of people who engage hashtags as a direct form of action to investigate, just act. There's typically no inquiry about the origins of the hashtag, nor is there any inquiry about the intent or purpose of the hashtag. And certainly there's been a severe lack of study regarding what happens post hashtag usage. So Erica goes on to describe the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, and also the pointing out that Bring Back Our Girls support further intervention from the U.S. puppet state in Nigeria, mask the reality that U.S. imperialism is protecting the corporate theft of the country's wealth from the Nigerian people. Caines 2012, I remember that shit. People, all the dumb liberals on my college campus were like, "Oh my God, Caines, we get a fundraise for Caines." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, you're fucking stupid." And then, of course, later on, you have as well SOS Cuba. 10 years after Caines 2012, hashtag activism is as popular as ever and largely still serving the same purposes. The proclaimed successes of both Bring Back Our Girls and Caines 2012 has ignited a fixed saviorism for people who live within the empire known as the U.S., result of both chauvinism and naivete. The Western savior complex consistently serves as cover for, quote, humanitarian imperialism. The SOS Cuba campaign on July 11, 2021, with a little investigation, showed that it was not originally tweeted in Cuba, but in Spain. There was also a massive increase in bot accounts. Almost all of the tweets under the hashtag were repetition of one another, calling for the full-out regime change and doubling down on the blockade. This is not the first time the U.S. has attempted to use social media to stir unrest. As with previous hashtag activist, and I love how she throws shade in here, slacktivist efforts, a cause was named in order to appeal to people's empathy, ensuring they would indeed get on board. The usage of Cuban political prisoners as a mean to make one-to-one comparisons with the U.S. criminal justice system under capitalism, such a good fucking point, because they're like, free them all, free all political I'm like, it's a completely different context, you know? Again, investigation is not encouraged, only quick action. This false flag protest, which had direct ties to U.S. institutions like the NED and the USAID, was successfully countered by organizers in and outside of Cuba, but it did not make the effort any less effective. And this tactic has been effective enough to try again. Right now, the hashtag Mahsa Amini is all over the internet in recognition of a young woman who died in police custody in Iran. In solidarity with the seemingly, quote, progressive protest for women's rights under a, quote, authoritarian religious dictatorship, the hashtag has taken on many forms, first as calls for, quote, justice, and eventually landing squarely at regime change. As with Cuba 2021, Venezuela 2019, and Nicaragua in 2018, there was an uptick in bot accounts outright calling for U.S. intervention and the toppling of the regime. The concern, however, is once again, as we witness a nation under the direct crossfires of U.S. imperialism, there's been no desire to investigate anything beyond the optics of the hashtag, which of course is of people cutting their hair, burning hijabs, exposing their breasts, and defacing mosques as a form of, quote, autonomy. The optics provided by the hashtag perpetuate the chauvinism that too often occurs, wherein people have engaged the internal contradictions of Iran as their own fight for women and girls' rights, despite those rights being non-existent or at best dismal for women and girls in the U.S. Furthermore, the continued confusion of ACAB, all cops are bad or all cops are bastards, as being universally applicable, also suggests that, as seen with Cuba, it is the job of the person tweeting from empire to dismantle police elsewhere despite the abolition movement in the U.S. being flimsy up. That's such a good fucking point. Lastly, the person heralded in the New Yorker for bringing the story to light and creating the hashtag, Masih Alinejad, is directly tied to Mike Pompeo and the Trump administration. She has been an exiled, strong advocate for harsh sanctions on Iran, even during the height of the pandemic, where countless Iranians lost their lives. Alinejad has also changed the story of what happened to Mahsa several times since her initial tweet, stories that contradict the CCTV footage the Iranian government made available. And here's the conclusion. Let me just finish this. While hashtag activism may appear to be a social media phenomenon where the people have taken matters into their own hands, becoming their own advocates and journalists, the truth is that it has been manufactured from the start. No institution or corporate endeavor in the West operates independent of the capitalist state and its motives, including social media. Radical publications have done thorough work connecting social media platforms back to state, whether that be ex-CIA agents working for Facebook or the White House hiring TikTokers. Yet people on the, quote, left in the U.S. have completely disregarded statecraft and counterinsurgency as a baseline and default terrain in 2022. Even Black Panther and Black Liberation Army elder Dhoruba bin Wahad has maintained that hashtag activism, particularly hashtag Black Lives Matter, has done more harm than good because, quote, intent does not prevent the ability to co-opt. The frustrating rinse and repeat cycle, I like that. The frustrating rinse and repeat cycle of hashtag movements that inevitably support or promote color revolutions occurs due to a lack of study and investigation. Sure, people can remember the aforementioned hashtags if they were on social media when they occurred, but many have not looked into whatever became of those endeavors. Since 2012, the U.S. has found no viable reason to change its formula simply because it has been successful. And where one effort may have failed, i.e. SOS Cuba, the U.S. only seems to regroup and try another angle and another country like Iran currently. The only viable solution is to organize radical pockets of revolutionary counter-propaganda and continue to tell the principled truth, which is what we are doing right here and right now. And thank you all for being on the stream. Thank you to Erica for that amazing article. Erica, what was the reaction and response to the article when you published it? What were some of the conversations that were going on?
It was pretty positive for the most part. I think people were like, noticing it and were just pretty much like, oh, finally somebody is like naming it or talking about it. I want to shout out Devin Springer because they helped me fine tune it, because a lot of these things are ideas that I'm like shooting off of my Instagram stories, more or less. I'm seeing some shit, I'm like, oh, and then one of the things that I always do if I see a comrade or somebody I know shooting off ideas like that, I'm always like, why don't you put that in 500 words and submit it? Like, so It just made sense that I just try to jot down some of those ideas. And then when I did, I was able to tap into Devin Springer, and they helped me like edit it down in ways that was functional. So I do want to shout them out, but that, it was necessary for me because I was seeing it, and then it really came about from a joke. A comrade of mine had posted a picture of Mary J. Blige dancing with a police officer, and then we just started sharing like some of the foolishness that Mary J. Blige was engaging in, like singing to Hillary Clinton and all of that. So as I'm, we're looking for things to like share back and forth. They had a picture with Mary J. Blige and the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, like one of those, like a screen cap of a tweet. And then I was like, remember Bring Back Our Girls? That was like a serious thing. Like, whatever happened to that shit? And then I looked into it, and all roads led to the expansion of AFRICOM in that region, because they were calling it military intervention. And it made me think about, Coney. And Coney, same thing. The expansion of AFRICOM in that region. And I thought it was important to connect because, one, it is BAP's month of action in AFRICOM, to shut down AFRICOM, but also both Coney and Bring Back Our Girls happened under the Obama administration. And we know that although AFRICOM started with Bush, it expanded drastically under Obama. And those hashtags were a large part of it because, like with Iran and like with Cuba and like with Nicaragua and Venezuela, a lot of those hashtags ultimately call for U.S. intervention. Like, please bring a military presence, especially Coney specifically. You can go to the Coney website that's still up. They have the letter that they sent to Obama and the response from Obama. But yeah, and then also looking into all of this, there's a quote from an author from Huffington Post that I even put in there where they're encouraging it. Like, they're saying verbatim, we should be using technology to make activism more accessible at all levels. And they were proclaiming that social media's power lies in its vast reach. And using it will soon be able to accomplish more with a few mouse clicks than was ever possible with a small army 100 years ago. And that struck me because that's something similar to what the founder of the National Endowment of Democracy said, I think in 1991, flippantly, that we can do now overtly what was done covertly years ago. So, like, all of these things, it just lined up. Like, all of these things are institutionalized, they are organized, they are state, like, part of the state apparatus. And again, with Devin Springer, they do a lot of good work around TikTok. Just the use of TikTok. I remember with the Ukraine situation, how all that shit blew up through these social media apparatus, and then to see people just so all in with every single hashtag that comes in, just because the optics are a burning cop car, because all cops are bad, even though people have no idea about anything regarding that state, that government, how the people regard those police. Like, I always use the example, I know my comrade Jackie went to Venezuela, and she always talks about seeing the police get recognized, like, in this big way, because they were part of the revolution. So just in that is understanding that they have a different function in that country. Perhaps they don't have the same function in every country, so maybe investigate that. The same thing with the Hong Kong protests. Like, people just only needed to see the optics of a burning police car to be all in. And then the backstory of it was, like, the guy killed his girlfriend and ran to Hong Kong, and that sprung up a whole movement for democracy. And so it's just like a wild thing. And then to even see, like, even in those protests, they had the Azov Battalion there supporting them. They had Trump figures and signs, Trump come save us. That's the other thing. It sort of always leans to the right. I know yesterday, 15 people were massacred in Iran. That's not widely publicized at all. And what the fuck does that have to do with the protests? But It's happening congruently because the whole point is civil unrest. And I don't think that people really grasp that or get that, or perhaps they do and don't understand because they hate all states. And that's a logic for them that they're committed to, which is a bullshit logic, but it's one that people are ultimately committed to. So they'll ride every wave. But I did want to know about the human rights thing, because that's always like a thing. We always have, a lot of these things are centered around people's human rights, the fight for democracy. But I did want to highlight Ujima Baraka's framework for people-centered human rights, where he says that the approach to human rights is a struggle, and it's based on people-centered approach to human rights struggle. So those are non-oppressive rights that reflect the highest commitment to universal human dignity and social justice that individuals and collectives define and secure for themselves through social struggle. So that's not the same shit that we're hearing. A lot of those times the human rights reflect states. They reflect Western hegemony or the attempts to expand Western hegemony. They align perfectly with right-wing tendencies almost always, and with the petty bourgeois or the bourgeois class. Ultimately, a lot of these things are funded through a petty bourgeois class, or funded through people who don't even live in the home state. Like with Cuba, that shit was coming out of Spain. It was coming out of right here in Georgetown. So when people, it's wild because it takes, like, there'll be people sounding these alarms initially, and then months later, folks are like, "Hey, wait, that doesn't make sense." Like the Juan Guaido thing is funny now, but in 2019, y'all wasn't holding up the embassy. Like, niggas
Yeah.
had a lot to say about the embassy. They had a
Yeah.
lot to say. But now people have big jokes about Juan Guaido, so it's like folks easily fall for it. Just like with Ukraine, everybody's reassessing Ukraine. Hey, why is our money going to Nazis? Now people are like, shouting at AOC and Ilion and all that. Despite this, we're month 10 now, but I mean, it takes people a while. But I made the point that by then, a lot of shit happens. Western hegemony has expanded. They have gotten another foothold. They have become more organized. They have figured shit out while we're still ultimately always aligned. Well, not we. While y'all are still
y'all fucking dumb motherfucker
every time.
Yeah. So many great points, Erica. Amazing. So much there to comment on. I just quickly want to mention the point about the government's people seeing protests anywhere. I think it's so frustrating as well, because I think this is one of the dangers of postmodernism and anarchist thought kind of dominating the left, because people are like, all cops are bad, all states are bad, all governments are bad. And that completely fails to understand that the government of Iran is a revolutionary government. It came to power through a revolution. They fucking kicked the U.S. out of the embassy. Like, very few countries have ever even done that. Same thing with all the socialist countries, Latin America and the Caribbean, and also Zimbabwe and other countries. Like, people just have such a short sense of history. And I think part of the media manipulation, there's misinformation, and there's also distraction, right? So like part of it is also one part of it is like putting out fake images, fake tweets, bots, fake headline, all these things, right? The other part of it, of media control and manipulation, is distraction, is keeping your eyes on something else, keeping you focused. Like, where were all these people when the U.S. sanctioned Iran? Like, the hardest hit people of sanctions on Iran are mothers who are trying to take care of their kids. One of the biggest issues in Iran are women and kids who have illnesses trying to get medicine. Because of the sanctions, they're not able to treat that or get the care that they need. And so where were all these so-called feminists when Iranian women were, suffering because of Western sanctions? But the distraction is here, focus on this one thing, on the hijab. And I just quickly want to, the whole campaign about the burning hijab too, like a lot of it is not just even the US and the Europe. A lot of it is also Israel. Israel has a kind of bourgeois feminist take on religion in the Middle East. We all know that Israel's number one enemy that it's scared of the most is Iran, because Iran takes no shit from Israel. Iran is the only country in the Middle East that does not play games with Israel. They're like, we'll fucking blow you guys off, literally to the sea, to liberate Palestine. I just want to share this. This is an ad. It's called "Freedom is Basic." It's an Israeli Zionist propaganda ad for I think it's like a hoodie or some shit. This is the same message of the hijab burning. This is what they're promoting. So I'm just gonna play this real quick, and then we'll turn to Chris. So some really horrible, really horrible. You're like, what the fuck did we just watch?
No, because I'm like,
it's crazy stuff.
Like, were they even Muslim? I'm confused. I'm like, were they just waiting to taking it off? Like, was it even?
Yeah, like it's this. This is the same propaganda line they're taking. Like, they're showing these quote unquote oppressed women, take off their hijab and then wearing Western clothing and associating that with freedom and advancement. crazy stuff. Chris, what are your thoughts on all of this, and just also tell us a little bit about your thoughts on like what the Western left, their response to Iran and Ukraine, in particular as well, academics.
Well, I don't know that commercial. That commercial reminds me, like, I don't know if you ever seen like those like pictures and people like put up and it's like, oh, Iran before, like,
Yeah. Oh, I
Islamic
hate
takeover, and it
that
shows
shit.
like a woman like in like some Western clothes, and it's like, look at how great the freedom is there and shit.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Just your thoughts on like why do you think so many
response?
people on the left like fucking like just believe all this shit about Iran, and like your analysis, right? Like what do you tell people when people are like, oh, I thought communists are supposed to like protest against Iran and stuff like that?
I was about to say the U.S. has a left.
Yeah, what left are you talking? Yeah,
you know, there's nah, but I think most of the responses that I've seen, even from folks that I respect, have been very disappointing. And I think in many cases, it's like, it's like a very small sector of folks that are really like, outright anti-imperialists and have like principled politics, unfortunately. And I think that, sort of across the board, I've seen people on the left talk about Ukraine's right to like national liberation. I've seen people invoke that sort of anti-colonial language when it comes to Russia. I've seen folks, talk about how Cuba is state capitalist now, and so the people are revolting against that. I've seen people talk about how Cuba is also not, how China's not, they're not really socialist, so that means that the people are, oppressed and all that sort of shit. I've seen the stuff with Iran, and I've seen folks even try to take a left, what is functionally an ultra left position on Iran by trying to, out left the left or whatever the fuck, by not, not taking a basic, principal position from an international perspective, in solidarity with what a coup attempt. And I think one of the things that, really pissing me off about a lot of folks is that they will invoke the memories of people who were overthrown by coups. The New Jewel movement in Grenada, Allende in Chile, Aristide, they or in Nkrumah, they'll invoke the memories of these people, but then not study how coups, take place and how they're manufactured. They're manufactured largely through the funding of independent, quote unquote, independent organizations. Independent journalists, and these sorts of things that are passed off, anti-authoritarian leftists, whatever. Again, these sort of like things without definition, but they sound good, and they take advantage of people's emotions, and they take advantage of people's immediate responses to just conditions. And I don't know, like I've even seen, like one of the things that really bothers me, especially like on the point of like being against authoritarianism in other countries or in support of political prisoners in other countries, that these folks they don't go hard for these types of things here in the United States. If they were really going hard for political prisoners, then where are all these organizations dedicated to political prisoners? Where are the mass organizations that at least have it as a component of their work? And even folks who, so there's a double problem with that, because some folks who even like a lot of the folks that occupy a lot of spaces having to do with political prisoners, a lot of them are like anarchists, unfortunately, and they do tend to also take ultra left positions on international politics. But that's kind of the state that shit is in here in the United States. We have the ultra left, and we have the left, which pretends to be radical, but then functionally outside of these sort of positions, functionally outside of like the United States, their positions are not radical in any real type of way. They're not anti-imperialist positions, and there are some things like the least that they can do is try to at least study the politics of the political prisoners that they represent, or that they claim to represent, or the legacies of the people that they claim to invoke. Study those histories. And that's really not there. And it leads to a lot of unprincipled positions and a lot of like scattered shit, going on in the United States. And, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, Mahsa, what do you think about that, Erica?
Yeah, I was gonna say this. I noted it in the piece, but it's like already held biases. Like I mentioned, like my introduction to Iran is like being a viewer of Shahs of Sunset. So you can imagine if everyone's thinking, well, shit, well, maybe that is what Iran's like. Maybe it is a dictatorship because it's propagandized in that way. So we're meant to see that, and that's why I made the point to say like they've been under sanctions for like at least 40 years. There has been so much anti-Iran propaganda that's older than I am. So most of us have grew up on that specific understanding of this country, which is probably why the images of the like before the revolution, is so appealing, because we've only ever seen one sort of image of Iran, which is like super authoritarian. It seems like nobody has any kind of rights, nobody can say anything anywhere. And I think one of the things that I learned from not just your interview, but then Rania on Breakthrough News had a great interview, that I think when people talk about these places, they don't talk about countries having like different areas and different towns and they make it like they collapse everything into one. So even if that Hajib law existed in one area, it didn't exist. It wasn't a widespread thing. And I think even understanding just that is a different understanding from what we're told or what we're made to understand about Iran, because it's just like, oh, it's functioning this whole way. It's like, no, they have democratic processes and people vote, and and people voted for that in that town. They didn't vote for it in the next one. Like just understanding that, I think, brings some clarity to what we're being actually told and what's actually being seen. And like I said, there's tens of thousands of people in the street for anti-U.S. Intervention and anti-U.S. meddling in Iran, in the capital city, and that's not at all what we're seeing on mainstream media. We're seeing them attack the mosque. We're seeing the cutting of the hair. The other thing for that with me is most likely than not, or what I've been seeing, I haven't seen any Iranian person do that. I've been seeing strictly Americans or celebrities or pseudo influencers. I don't know if I want to be shady or not to name. I'm thinking about it.
Go for it. Whatever you want to say. We have no NGO overlords.
I don't know if folks are familiar with Smarter in Seconds. That little so Blair Imani recently just shaved all her hair off. So in solidarity, and it's just like, these people have reach. These people are influencers in a sense, and there's no investigation on anything. So they kind of carry that. They carry it. They carry the water for the state, for empire. And that's primarily why I wrote the hashtag piece, because when you see how it's spread, especially Bring Back Our Girls, I mean, people were just sharing it indiscriminately. It was all over. It was a big thing. And then by the time it got to Michelle Obama, then it became a massive thing. But I mean, from Russell Simmons to Chris Brown, I mean, every sort of celebrity that you can think of was sharing Bring Back Our Girls, but nobody was really asking any questions. And then when I say that it resulted in the expansion of AFRICOM, we know that one of the claims is that it's fighting terrorism on the continent, and Boko Haram is a terrorist organization. So it makes sense that the U.S. sends people out there and intervene. So I don't know. It's just, for me, it's just like it just snowballs into something bigger and bigger. And I when Cuba happened, I was like, wow, this is wild. And then Ukraine happened. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And now this, you're like, when the fuck does it really stop? Like, because it's more out of control. And we're not really, I mean, we can make all the criticisms we want, but we're earnestly not organized in a way to combat that shit at the levels that it's reaching. And that's what's frightening for me, because it's like, hold on, does anybody really understand what we're engaging in? Like, even if you earnestly believe these things, I think the failure to allow people to handle their own processes, like you mentioned, Iran, this is a revolutionary government. Cuba is a revolutionary. Like, these people have had their revolutions, meaning that these people have already gone through the processes of having to struggle and deal with governments they don't fucking like. So maybe like like allow for that to happen, and your position would be, hey, end the sanctions, because that doesn't help if they're trying to really fight against their government, because sanctions doesn't help them get food. Sanctions, their everyday life, it creates barriers to where you can't struggle. Just like how we understand being colonized here, and the sanctions that we have here domestically prevents us from struggling back against our government. So yeah, that's it. That was
Well,
all.
definitely. And for those of you listening on the screen, we have a young girl, Iranian girl, who has a sign that says "Down with the USA, down with Israel," and she has a picture of the Ayatollah of Iran, Khomeini, with the actual revolutionary Iranian flag. These are images you're never gonna see in mainstream media. It's always gonna be some blue-haired fucking, whatever, like cutting their hair and all these things. But like the average woman in Iran who's like this, who supports the government, like they're never going to show that. Erica pointed out correctly that there have been so many thousands of women protesting in the streets in support of the Iranian government. No mention of that at all. No mention of that. And it's important to keep that in mind. And even if their cultural values or religious values don't fully align with ours or what we have here, like that's up to them. Like that's their culture. It's not up to us to be like, oh, because you guys are religious or whatever, I don't like that, so I'm not going to support you. I think that's the biggest thing, because like I think, and I say this amongst us as comrades, like just to be kind of straight up, as somebody who supports, I support. You guys know me. I've been a long time supporter of Cuba, of the Cuban Revolution. I love Cuba. I love Fidel. But just being frank here, I feel like it's easier to defend Cuba in many ways and to defend Iran because the Iran has a different cultural system. The religion is different. People don't really know much about Iran in general. And so because of that, they'll take any little excuse they can. Oh, women wear hijabs. Okay, I don't like it. Or, oh, they have a religious government. Okay, I don't like it. It's not worth defending. So even within the Cuba solidarity spaces, like, because the thing with a lot of the Cuba solidarity movement is like you have sometimes these like white feminists who kind of like take over those spaces, and they're like, oh, like, I'm a long time Cuba activist, and it's like, all right, but then they're like, I support the women. Like I was talking, I'm not gonna say her name, but there's this white feminist lady who was like as a long time Cuba feminist solidarity activist, like I oppose the Iranian government, and it was just disgusting. Like it's just crazy to me, because then you see like what the governments of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, they all send statements of support to President Raisi and to the Islamic Revolution, and it's just completely disconnected. And it's like there's so much ego involved. There's so much like misunderstanding and just judgment. Like people, because of Islamophobia, because of Zionist media propaganda, like they just have such a distorted view about Muslims in general. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I was also gonna note, like, I mean, Angela Davis made a statement, Cornel West has made statements. I mean, so it's that's what I said. It's really out of control. But it's also, these are people who support Palestinian revolution, liberation of Palestine. So it's just like, these are, for me, even to that point of hashtags, you see all these free Palestine hashtags. People are full support, but they're like blatantly attacking the one country that materially supports the Palestinian liberation movement. Like, we can hashtag free Palestine, or we can wear our From the River to the Sea shirt, but we're not giving them niggas weapons. We're not like we're not giving them
yeah. No, they actually legit give them fucking weapons.
That's two different things. And I think when we look at it from that scale, I mean, it's really, there's no internationalism on the left. Like, there's none at all. It's very insular, and it's very much easier to support Cuba. This is always our struggle. We show up and like, hey, remember Haiti, because yeah, it's a lot easier to support Cuba, especially it's easier to support Cuba than it is Nicaragua. It's easier to support Cuba than it is Venezuela, because people again have been in this shit for forever, and don't want to tamper with too much U.S. U.S. back shit. So it's a lot easier for people to take that route as opposed to being principled around people that are really catching in countries that are really catching their ass behind it. I mean, we have abolitionists that do the same thing about the DPRK. Like they highlight, oh, they have all these prisons. So it's just like it's a wild dynamic. But yeah, it's a very hard line, and it's very noticeable when you come into these organizing spaces that it is a lot easier for people to say end the blockade than it is for them to stand principally with in Iran or Venezuela or
Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
No, most definitely. What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I mean, there's a good comrade of mine that like when the whole stuff with Cuba happened, and the amount of people that were. I mean, one of the surprising things that I think, I don't know, we're getting to kind of a point where it's not that easy to defend Cuba. I mean, a lot of younger folks are falling for this shit because of social media, and because of that hashtag activism. And I think that like the opportunistic way that they have employed like different issues in Cuba, like internal issues, to manipulate that for a counter-revolutionary program is has been very efficient in many ways. And as one of my comrades said, when it comes to Cuba, like folks, like it's no principles, it's just vibes,
Right.
You've seen, you saw like 15 different Afro-Cuban, accounts pop up, and when that happened, and it's just like, well, okay, so do you know any, like, do you study anything about Cuba? Like, do you have any contacts with Cuba other than like maybe the couple people that that live in Union City, New Jersey, or in Miami or some shit? It's like, I don't know, like it's really weird. Like it's like this sort of, again, this sort of displacement of responsibility to, first off, an international struggle within the United States, against internal colonialism here, and then putting that off onto supporting, what people think are revolutionary movements around the world, and just again, just going off vibes, going off of idealism, going off of things that they don't have to study, they don't have to read, they don't have to know anything about a place, but they can support. And I think that's one of the things of also being centered here in the United States is that you can support like the complete destruction of another country and not and just like, oh well, it's like go on with the rest of your life,
right.
Like, oh well, irreversible damage there, let's just keep keep going and keep voting for AOC and Ilhan Omar and talk about how they're leading some progressive. I've seen people who are like literally like in the Free Mumia campaign and talk about how AOC is going to lead the revolution and shit. I'm like, I'm like sitting here like, you're unironically saying this shit, like that's amazing. But it shows again like just the lack of principles and how that is intentional. Like there's been like interviews that like Jared Ball has done with like Durán bin Wahab, where like Durán complains about like the generation has no reference to the current generation has no reference to their past, but the fact is that this is intentionally done through this propaganda work and through one of the main points of COINTELPRO was to separate the youth from inheriting the sort of radical legacy,
right?
And so to literally just break up that transference of a movement. So I think you see a lot of that happening today, and unless propaganda work is done in conjunction with organizing to based on some solid principles, then that's gonna keep on happening, and we will see Libya's and Haiti's just continue to happen.
But that's why I say the 90s is understudied, like drastically, like the policies and the right shift and globally that happened in the 90s really tracks to what we're seeing today. And then also, like, even to the point, I think a lot of the why Cuba is like I don't want to say like it's easier to defend, but you see more people defend it more is because there's been so much organizing work throughout the decades to make it so. And you could see that like that's what the danger of these hashtag activism is, just like distorting all of that work that took, you know, collective years of building to get it to a point. So yeah, yeah, that's it.
No, it's true, and I think that's one of the things that's why I always try to uplift movements, even within the left or anti-imperialism, that don't get a lot of love and attention, and that they should. In particular, like Haiti, for example, like there are literally protests every day against colonialism. People politically, I've been to Haiti twice. I've spoken to people. People are very, very politically advanced. Many people I've spoken to in Haiti support Russia and China. There's actually even images of Haitian protesters waving flags of Russia and Donbass, supporting the fight against fascism. And they also want to trade with China and be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. There's so many advanced political tendencies in Haiti that we never hear about, and there's no solidarity movement with it. In Africa, there's so many socialist revolutionary movements as well, especially in particular in South and Southwestern Africa. So many amazing things happening in Angola and Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana that we never even hear about on the left, and India as well. And it's just like, it's important for people to study and to humble even myself. Like, I don't pretend that I know everything about Iran, and I try to say that every stream. Like, I don't know a lot of things about Iran, but I have my gut instinct. I know enough to say that these protests are a color revolution, that these protests are intended to topple a revolutionary government and implement a neoliberal Western Zionist government that subjugates the people to Western capitalism and imperialism. And they're using the optics of feminism. They're using the optics of leftist uprisings to try to topple an anti-imperialist government. And I think what you guys were alluding to as well, which is such an important point, is in particular with the 90s, you know, you hit on something very crucial with the 90s is a very understudied decade. We have to, of course, talk about the role of the internet, of mass media, and just our attention span. I mention this a lot, but I think it's worth mentioning. Like, when I talk to Ofelia's nephew, or like just younger kids who are like 10, 11 years old, even 3-4-year-old kids who the whole time they're like this. And it's just like, and I don't want to talk shit because obviously like it's fucking hard to parent.
In the back, I don't know if you can hear my son, because that's literally what he's doing right now.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah. It's and it's like, and here's the thing, I never want to place blame on the individual people, because this is a systemic issue related to capitalism. This is a consequence, because there are no resources for mothers, for parents, for child raising and all this stuff, or good quality education. There's so much phone addiction, but it's like the impact of the internet and social media, the TikTokification of our brains. Like, we're viewing things in like matters of seconds. Like, even if you look at the videos that they're showing kids these days, it's all jump cuts, right? In film and editing, a jump cut is like when you jump to a next scene, right? It's not like a long scene that's drawn out. I was watching an older movie with with Ofelia's nephew, and he was like, "This movie's so boring. It's taking so long." And he's used to like boom, 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 boom. It's like the TikTok next. Right. That shit fucks up our brains. Like, that is not good for us, and that's how we view uprisings. That's how we view like fucking, protests or things going on. They're like, oh, what is this? Mahsa Amini. Okay, I support that. Next. All right, I'm going to move on. I'm never going to go back and actually study what the fuck happened, right? The same thing happened with Syria. It's like nobody goes back to see like, oh yeah, all that shit they said about Assad using chemical weapons, it was all bullshit. It was all fake. It was all lies. But we're already on like the 10th slide up, so it's just like, any final thoughts, comrades? Because I know it's kind of late on the East Coast. I can talk to you guys for hours, but I know you guys got to head out. Erica, any final thoughts from you, and then we'll turn to Chris.
Yeah, I would just want to plug that I did write something about that Sister Soldier and the lessons we still aren't learning, because I touch on the Telecommunications Act and how that influenced how we even digest media these days. So yeah, I definitely think the 90s is understudied. I definitely encourage people to investigate. You know, I know people like to say no investigation, no right to speak, yet they keep speaking. So, so maybe we can
That's hilarious.
get that together. Yeah, and please join organizations. I think a lot of my understanding, especially when I came, like I've been through the trenches of Syria, I've been through the trenches of Tigray, so I'm kind of like a little bulletproof for this Iranian thing, because I've already been hit. I've already been a genocide supporter. But I do feel it important to join organizations. A lot of how I've gauged or started to understand a lot of these things has been through struggling with comrades around these issues. So I do think that that's important. And then, yeah, that's it. Continue to support Black Lives for Peace Month of Action against AFRICOM. And thank you always, Romero. And appreciate you, Chris, as well. This is great.
Of course, Erica, always bringing amazing knowledge and for commentary. Chris, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I just want to second that point of like joining an organization, even if it's not the one that you ideally, would think of at the time. I think that
Democrats? No, I was playing.
No. I'm
in a DSA
those
now,
fighting fascism at home. Those
yeah.
But it's important to be or to have people like in community with you, so that you're not also feeling isolated in these things. Because I think it's very easy to like also feel isolated and alone, or be gaslit for the certain positions. Like I remember I was canceled on the internet for supporting China against the the sort of propaganda around the whole Xinjiang thing, and and people were like trying to show me that I was wrong by posting videos or sending me videos of stuff that were like sort of those weird edited videos, like this is taking place in a completely different country, and yet this is it takes like 2 Google clicks to like debunk the thing, and yet we're still here. But I just think that like study like in starting off with like just very basic principled materials like in community with people, I think is very important and goes a very long way, because then y'all could go and affect change in wherever setting that you're at. I would like to plug folks into the National Jericho Movement website, as well as the National Alumni Association for the Black Panther Party, where you can get information on the Black Panther Party and also donate to political prisoner campaigns. And I think again, one of the main points of also not only freeing political prisoners, but also that goes a long way into actually connecting the politics of that generation to now, and countering a lot of that COINTELPRO manipulations on the movement. And it also leads people away from sort of just cosplaying as Panthers or Young Lords, which happens a lot.
People like dressing up.
Well, yeah, and using the name and everything. But appreciate you both. Y'all do awesome work. Free all political prisoners and prisoners of war. All power to the people. Free the land. Death to America.
Beautiful, beautiful. I agree with all those beautiful, amazing slogans. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Chris. You guys are awesome. I look forward to having you guys back on soon. Peace out, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care. Love y'all. Peace out.
Fascist son of the morning, who gonna chase you out of earth. on an iron shirt and chase the fascists out of earth. Who no put on an iron shirt and chase the fascists out of earth. Who no send them to outer space to find another place. Who no send them to outer space to find another place. Fascist is a evilous man, but him can't choke it on a man. So when I check him, I lost in hand. And if him flip, I go with him man. Who no put on him iron shirt and check the fascist out of earth. Yes, who no put on another shirt and chase the racists out of earth. Who no send them to outer space to find another place. Yes, who no send them to outer space to find another place. Oh na na, oh na na. All right. Hey, hey, hey. Fascist is a evilous man, but him can't choke it on I man. When I check him, I lost in hand. And if him slip, I go with him man. No put on an iron shirt and chase the racists out of earth. Yes, no put on him iron shirt